This episode is brought to you by the MJ family of companies. Whatever interests you in the cannabis community can be found at mj.com. Unique and original content updating you on the latest trends in marijuana legalization, businesses and executives that are disrupting the industry, along with recreational entertainment and the latest deals on the brands and products you love. Visit mj.com today. Welcome to the Pot Live Podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G, and I can't believe it. We've already broken through 100 episodes. We want to thank you, the listeners, thousands of you that have sent beautiful comments, beautiful notes to us. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy it. This next year, we're going to bring you the thought leaders, entertainers, trailblazers, CEOs of all the cannabis companies you want to hear from. People that are inventing new products, people that are bringing this cannabis industry to the mainstream. We are going to offer you education, value, and entertainment. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. And we are back with another episode of the Pot Live Podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G. And today, our special guest is Mr. George Breiwa. He is the founder of Dynavap. Dynavap proudly designs, engineers, and manufactures all of their battery-free vaporizers in-house using the highest quality materials available. We're going to find out what makes them different, what makes them unique. George, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Len. Glad to be on the show.
Excellent. So let's start off first. Who is George Breiwa? Where did you come from? How did you get into this industry? What's your background?
Okay. I'm a guy that likes to make things and solve problems. And I come from a very different line of work than manufacturing. Used to be in the service industry, used to do stoves and fireplaces, as well as spray foam insulation, but have kind of had a passion for, I'd say, the cannabis industry for quite some time. But I didn't like the smoking end of things. So that kind of gave me some motivation, some drive to see if I could find a better option.
Sure. So you did basically service industry, like you said, and then what was that light bulb moment? I mean, you kind of just described your interest. Was there a light bulb moment where you said, I'm just going to jump into this industry?
Well, there kind of was. And, you know, I was sitting around kind of having a nice conversation with some people that I liked being around. And we were using this interesting butane-powered vaporizer made by this company in Ireland. Looks like a walkie-talkie. It's kind of a big one called an Iolite. And, you know, it worked okay. And it was kind of nice because it didn't have any batteries. But it was big and it was expensive and it took a long time to heat up. And there were some other things, you know, about it that just didn't seem like they're as good as they could be. And so it really kind of created a question. And that question being, how difficult could it possibly be to make a simple device that people could use to consume their cannabis without lighting it on fire? And something that's not as big or as complex or as expensive as most of the options that are currently on the market. And that kind of began the journey.
So tell me why smoking was not attractive to you and how the Dynavap product line can actually heat up product without using a battery and without using a flame.
Okay. So maybe I'm just a wuss, but
hey, welcome to group, George. Welcome to
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. The smoke was just really harsh. It would burn my throat. It'd make my lungs hurt. It'd make me feel kind of yucky. I didn't like the way it tasted. And that was probably one of the biggest things is I always actually enjoyed, you know, the smell of some good quality flower. But as soon as I got the taste of lighting it on fire, it was like, why can't it taste the way it smells? Because, you know how good fresh flower can smell. Most people think it smells great. But then when you light it on fire and you take a taste, it's like, it sure doesn't taste the way it smells. And it's kind of disappointing. Well, what I found out is that when you use a vaporizer or a thermal extraction device, what we like to call them, where you're just using a little bit of heat to evaporate the active compounds and leave everything else behind, it tastes like it smells. And, you know, the first time I experienced that, it was like, now that's what I'm talking about. I'll take more of that, please. And so it really became a huge motivating thing to see, you know, how can I get more of that? But even better, is there a way that I can utilize, some of the things that I like to do? I like to tinker. Can I make it easier for other people to get this experience as well?
Now, how does, I mean, obviously, like what was that, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was all that bad press about vaping and, people buying
Ah,
these
yeah.
garbage products from gas stations and stuff like that. And we
Yep.
know that the legit dispensaries don't have that type of product. How does your product line avoid that entire narrative?
Okay, that's an awesome question. I'm glad you asked that. So our product is kind of an independence product, right? It's energy source independent. In other words, it doesn't require batteries. It just requires any sort of heat source in order to function. It's also independent of any particular manufacturer, any cart design, things along those lines. What you put in this device, well, you can grow it in your backyard. You can grow it in your basement if you want. You can get it from a friend. You can just put in raw flour. Uh, there are other things you can put in there, but the thing is, you have the freedom to choose and the freedom to source your product from wherever you think it makes the most sense. And the issues that people were having with the vaping products, a couple of years ago, were these carts that were being imported or being filled by people running kind of uh, shadow operations, in their basement, whatever, just putting whatever materials they could possibly source, filling these carts up and selling them on the black market. It's just mystery liquid. You have no idea where it came from or what's in it.
Which is crazy that people would even ingest that, right, without knowing it was
Yeah.
tested or legit in any way. It's
Well,
crazy.
it actually it is crazy, but at the same time, you know, when we think about, and I'm not trying to diss, concentrates or carts or anything along those lines, because they can be a very nice way to medicate if that's what you're seeking, but you're still pledging all of the confidence and the health of your body in the regards that, I've got this thing with this liquid in it, and the label says it's what's in it, but how do I know what's in it? Versus, on the opposite side, yeah, I've got a friend, he's actually growing. I've been in his garden and he harvested it. It looks like what he grew. It smells like what he grew. Where's your confidence, right?
Right.
And again, no negativity here. It just, it's a freedom of choice. And that's one of those things that I think is really nice and people appreciate, that our devices give that person that freedom to choose whatever it is that they want to put in there.
And tell us about now, if everyone goes to dynavap.com, that's dynavap.com, they actually, George's team actually educates you on their devices, shows you everything about it, tells you a lot about the company. I know we're doing a audio only podcast here, George. Can you walk us through a couple of the products that you offer?
Sure. So what I think I'd want to do, if you don't mind, just a little preface that, because I don't want this to sound like a commercial. I think our products are a nice choice, but the biggest thing is really, we're kind of on a mission here to help the world consume their cannabis and some of their other botanicals in a healthier way. Leave the smoke and all of the yucky things that come with smoke, leave them behind, because they're really not necessary to get what it is that you're looking for. And there's lots of other devices on the market that'll do the same thing. So if anything, I'm just hoping that we can broaden people's awareness a little bit, that there's some interesting choices out there to still consume the products that you like without burning them.
Yeah, and
So,
that's why I wanted you to describe the product a little bit,
sure.
because I also want you to touch on while you're going over them. And you're right, it's
Okay.
not really a commercial; it's an educational moment here. What does it still give you the same high as smoking flower? Is it diminished? Is it enhanced? What's the feeling for the person who's never tried this type
Okay.
of device before?
So awesome question. So when we're talking about effects, what most people are going to find is that when they use a device like ours, is that the effects tend to be a little bit cleaner and a little bit less sedating, because you don't have some of the carbon monoxide and some of the other relatively yucky things that tend to be in the smoke. So on top of that, one of the other attributes that you're going to find, again, regardless whether it's our device or anyone else's, is your consumption of flour tends to go down. And there's two reasons for that. Number one is you're not burning it. Okay. And the funny thing is when you're smoking a joint or lighting a bowl or whatever it might be, what you're doing is you're largely using your flower as the energy source to vaporize your active compounds that are in that flower. It just, as you're burning it, you're making a whole lot of smoke on top of the vaporized compounds that you're looking for, and it mixes all together. And so in the process of burning your flower for fuel to vaporize the active compounds that you really want, you end up losing a whole lot of it. So when you use an extraction device or a vaporizer, you don't burn it. So you're able to get a whole lot more out of your flower. So really fun in that regard. And all we're really using, again, whether it's our device or, someone else's device, we're just using a little bit of heat. So another analogy I like to use is when you put some cookies in the oven, right? It usually doesn't take that long, and all of a sudden, the whole area around the oven smells like cookies because you're
not a bad smell, George. Not a bad
no,
smell.
it's not a bad smell at all. And the funny thing is, your cookies tend to taste the way that they smell. And it's funny. Why is that, Len?
Because there's no flame.
Because they haven't been burnt. Right.
Yep.
So it's just a funny thing. We don't think about burning our cookies to consume them. We bake them and then we eat them. And it's super fun because with a vaporizer, you can bake your flowers and they're going to smell and they're going to taste the same way or very close to the same way, because baked cookies smell a little bit more baked than, raw cookies, but they're very similar. And then the fun part is you can take what's left over out of the oven. And when I say the oven, I'm not talking about the cookies right now. I'm talking about your vaporizer, whether it's a vap cap or it's some other company's vaporizer. They refer to your already vaped bud or your AVB as that, ABV. And there's still a lot of active compounds in there. And just like the cookies out of your oven, you can eat that material and it functions like an edible. So you get double the mileage out of your flower.
Interesting. All right. So I also want to hit you with, from the business point of view, a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs, business owners, or, even just work for different companies in the industry.
Okay.
How has the marketing of your product, how has that journey been? Has the last we're recording this towards the end of 2021. Obviously, the last 18 months with the pandemic has been a struggle for a lot of businesses. Has that hindered your ability to expand and get the word out there? Has it helped? What was your experience over the last 18 months?
Okay, so my experience was rather varied. So at the very beginning, March of 2020, we were moving in a good direction. We're right on track. We had a trade show that I flew to Spain for in the beginning of March that was going to be starting. I think it was the 14th of March. And I arrived in Spain, and a lot of people were asking if I really wanted to go because of all the things they were hearing on the news. Like, yeah, I'm going to go anyway. And I arrived in Spain, tired, jet lagged, and about 3 or 4 hours after I got to Barcelona, I find out that they've just canceled the trade show. Supposed to be setting up the next day, and they canceled it. So that's kind of how it all began in our world. So I ended up later that night finding out that Trump had banned travel from Europe. So I had to hurry up and cancel everything that I'd planned for the next 2.5 weeks that I was going to be there and fly home quick. And then we had to start to adjust to the new norm, which ended up being kind of interesting in the regard that with the shutdowns and a whole lot of the checks that were being issued by various governments, our sales continued to climb.
Great.
So 2020 actually wasn't a terrible year for us sales-wise. 2021, started out pretty good, but things have slowed down a little bit now that people are either going back to work or not going back to work. And it seems like, if anything, the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people being at home, maybe we're just thinking about buying products like ours, purchase them. And now a lot of that demand has been somewhat filled. And we've noticed that a lot of the other companies that we work with, distributors, retailers, their sales kind of across the board have been down over the last few months. I don't know what's your experience been, Len.
Yeah, I've heard that a similar story to that. The whole stay-at-home orders last year was actually a boon for the cannabis and accessory industry in a big way, like you just described. And then it kind of phased out as people started to get back to, I don't know if you call it normal life, but the new norm, like you said. So I've heard a very similar trajectory from several CEOs and executives that I've interviewed. I'm wondering, what's going to happen over the next few years, because that's a good segue for my next line of questions for you is,
Okay.
before the 2020 presidential election, cannabis legalization was a hot button topic. And then, all the, lack of a better word, BS in the country. And then COVID kind of took precedence over the political landscape as well and pushed cannabis legalization to the side.
It kind of did.
Yeah. So what are your feelings going forward? Do you think that legalization is on the horizon in the near future? Maybe it's pushed really to the back burner, and how will legalization help an industry or a business like yours to succeed?
Well, I think it's a super fun question. And my perspective is, although it may seem like things have slowed down, they haven't. There's some activists out there that are doing a really good job keeping this, front of mind for many people. And I don't know if you know this, but there's been some really exciting news that's happened just in the last couple days. And that is, there's this cute little country in Europe by the name of Malta. I don't know if you've heard of it or not.
Yes, I love Malta.
Okay. They are in the global news because they have announced that they are going to legalize cannabis in their country, which will be the first country in Europe to legalize cannabis. Because believe it or not, contrary to popular belief, cannabis is not legal in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands. Okay, it's available. Yes, you can buy it, but it's not legal. Okay?
Right.
And I know it sounds really funny, but I'm actually not joking. There's some really interesting YouTube videos if you guys want to watch it and look into it a little bit more. The story behind why it is the way it is just a whole lot more into why some of our governments are just a little bit yucky. Don't want to go there right now, but Malta is going to be the first country in Europe to legalize, which gets me into the next topic here. Germany has also announced that they have intentions to do the same thing, as well as Luxembourg. And with Germany being one of the largest economies in Europe on the cusp of doing it, Malta getting ahead of the curve and doing it first, they're going to start to pave that way. And I think a lot of the countries in EU are going to start to cascade following suit, because they know the tax revenue that is going to start to fall once this happens. And as these other large economies start to go that direction, it's going to be harder and harder for the other countries and the other states to continue to hold out.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel so terrible for this is, I think, our over 130 episodes we've done of this show, and I root for every single person I've interviewed, and it's so hard because for the companies that touch the flower, at least,
right,
they can't go interstate, they can't bank safely. It's just such a struggle, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hits, and even though sales are going, higher because people are at home, like you mentioned earlier, they still can't expand. They're still throwing money in the fire. They're burning huge taxes, huge security expenses. And it's just, I feel so bad for them because no one can really blossom, pun
right
there, the correct way with all of these legalization hurdles,
And it's, I find myself asking a simple question is, why is it like this? What is the real reason?
Big pharma. Big pharma wants to take control.
And, and I'm sorry, because I don't want to get negative, but it's hard to argue that.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, because here you've got a product that's, I'm not saying it's easy to grow, but for a person that's maybe a little bit further along in their life and they don't have a whole lot going on, maybe they actually really enjoy growing a few plants around their house, in their garden, whatever. And if it takes the place of some of the other, maybe not so nice, maybe slightly more toxic prescription drugs that cost a whole lot of money, not just to them, but the insurance companies and the other governments that are paying the bill, what's wrong with that?
Exactly. But I think the underlying, I don't know if I want to call it an issue, but basically what a lot of big money people have told me is that the giant companies, whether it's Philip Morris, Altria, the mothership, they already did a land grab, right? Like when it goes legal, they're just going to take over like they did with tobacco. You're going to have Amazon weed, Uber weed. You're going to have all these giant companies wipe out the mom and pop shops, which is terrible if they, and maybe they'll acquire a select few. But, once weed's available on Amazon, what does that do to the local dispensaries when you can just have it sent right to your house? You know what I mean? In a few hours or the next day or
Well,
whatever.
I wonder if it'll actually end up that way.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's just like, you just hear people rumblings, right?
Well, of course. But so I'd like to share a little bit more of a positive perspective.
Yes.
Okay. And so coming from the land of cheese, I can tell you that although Wisconsin doesn't have as many cheese factories as it used to, it still has quite a number.
Yep.
And a good number of them are still family owned. And they make some really awesome artisan cheeses. At the same time, Wisconsin's also known for another product, we call it beer. And even though we've got giant breweries, like Anheuser-Busch and conglomerates, right?
Yep.
You can still buy beer that's made by a local brewery that's maybe got a little bit more love in it than some of these commercial ones.
Yes. And I think there is a trend towards that. So I not
There
to cut you off, but I think there could be the same trend in cannabis, if that's what you're about to say.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah. It's almost like those microbreweries or boutique breweries that people really flock towards, and then they get too big and they get scooped up anyway. But yeah, I know what you're saying. And hopefully that's what happens in cannabis, where these smaller businesses can thrive.
Well, and that's what I'm really hoping for. And it kind of gets us back to, part of an earlier conversation where the right device, again, one that we make or one that another company makes, allows for that freedom of choice to source your product. So you can source it from a local organic grower, or you can go to one of the dispensaries and buy commercialized, stuff that's produced under tightly controlled conditions and is likely a very good product. But you have the choice.
Yes. Agree. All right. So George, before I hit you with my last question, tell everyone how they can find out more information about Dynavap, how they can get in touch with your team, or how they can educate themselves on your product.
So, of course, there's Dynavap.com. Also, if you're just curious about the product, what it looks like, etc., or you'd want an opinion that's not coming direct from our company, just type our name, Dynavap, Dynavap, into any search engine and just look around and see what you see. A really fun thing to do is to click on images and just scroll, because what we have here is we've got a product that is relatively easy to configure in a very personalized way with various options. And many of them not even being made by our company, because we've got this whole community of accessory makers out there that make various things, whether it's an aftermarket stem or a storage device or what have you, to really personalize your cannabis consumption experience.
Excellent. All right. So before I let you go, George, and thank you so much for being on the show, give everyone one thing about the overall industry, or even maybe your niche industry, something that concerns you and something that excites you going forward into 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what concerns me is the ongoing, I'm going to call it challenges, for people to navigate the industry from a legal perspective, because it's just a mess, and it's an unnecessary mess. So I'm hoping to see some good progressive change in that regard in the near future. What excites me is the fact that we are seeing change, and there's some really cool things out there, and there's more and more people that are giving thermal extraction or vaporization a try and finding that, you know what, this actually gives me some things that I like better than smoking. I'm not saying smoking is bad or wrong, but I think it's a good thing for people to explore, to see, you know what, there might be another option that might be worth considering, at least occasionally.
George Breiwa, founder of Dynavap, thank you so much for taking the time to be our guest. Thank you for educating me as well as our listeners. We wish you nothing but the best, and thanks for being on the show.
Yes, thank you, Len.
Awesome. And we will see everyone next time on the Pot Live Podcast. If you are into the recreational side of the cannabis industry, yes, stoners, I'm talking to you, then thepot.com is the online and mobile destination for you. That's right, THEPOT.com, thepot.com. Where else can you find the exclusive Pot Mate of the Month? Take a pot quiz and win prizes. Scroll through hilarious memes and jokes and check out the latest podcasts, news, and trends, all while having your own profile and voice in the pot.com forum. Visit thepot.com today and get lit.